Hi, so in this video, I wanted to take a snippet of a lesson that I was teaching with Ty's young mum and young rider. So Ty is the horse that's in the video at the moment. He's a 9-year-old off the track thoroughbred, and he's been in for retraining with me. So in this video, what I do, so this is sort of her official lesson before he goes back home. And I ride him first. So the snippet that you'll see today is me riding him before his young rider gets on. And what I'm wanting to explain to her, so basically I want to demonstrate how he's going and what he's doing, where he's up to. And the issue that I'm sort of talking about here in this video is this whole sort of elusive, the elusive on the bit. And it's really hard to explain how to get on the bit. And there's so many different, ways to do it. A lot of them are wrong. And it comes with, so on the bit isn't forcing the horse in a frame. Instead, it is a blah, blah, a consequence of really good and correct retraining. And I use equitation science training as part of my retraining off the track thoroughbreds program. And you'll see me describe in this lesson as I'm riding him around why he's putting his head up and what I do to ask him to put his head. It's not so much forcing his head into a position. It's more, the only reason he's putting his head up is because he's bracing. So he's going against it. He's stiffening his body. So imagine, I like to use some analogies, and I like to use a dancer as an analogy. So dancing, and I used to be a dancer when I was younger. And I've always loved dancing, though I haven't done a lot of it. I chose horse riding, but I really love I love dancing, and I look at riding as a sort of dancing in a way. Even you're very sporty, like your eventing and your track work. I've ridden track work for over 17 years, and you do get the classical dressage, and that is seen as sort of an art in the classical dressage area. But I see all types of riding as an art, as a partnership. You're developing a partnership with another sports person. Just say, like in dancing, you've got your partner. And I like to view riding in that way. We're working as a partnership, and obviously being the human, okay, that we're the leader in the dance, okay, so we're training the horse to use their body in the correct way. So same as dancing, you're training your partner. If you're the male dancer, you're usually the leader, but you work in harmony with each other, and that's what riding is to me. So going back to the head is a consequence of correct retraining and the horse using their body properly. Suppleness being, and that's a combination of them being physically able to carry their weight on their hind end, to be able to physically bend through the ribs, to be able to physically soften in their poll and soften in their jaw. And what I do as I talk in this snippet of this lesson, I mentioned that I've already taught Ty to soften in his jaw in hand first. Okay, so everything that I've taught Ty, I've taught in hand first, and then once I have completed my in hand foundation training, I then go under saddle and I apply the responses that is learnt in hand to under saddle. Obviously they're a little bit different. So for instance, when we're under saddle, we ask the horse to go forward from a leg aid, whereas in hand we train the horse to go forward from light lead rein pressure initially, and then dressage whip tap. But horses learn by association, and you can also use your voice as well. So that is part of equitation science training, if you're interested in following up that. So going back to Ty, so when he raises his head, that is a symptom of him bracing in his body, so getting stiff. So for instance, if you imagine a dancer, a classical ballerina, and she's, you know, it's very hard, even though it looks very graceful. So it also looks very graceful for horses going around lovely and in frame. But to get to that graceful period, they, you know, for a dancer, for instance, she'll struggle with her movements to get to when she's on stage and it all looks seamless and smooth. She'll be muscle sore, movements won't go correct. So, you know, she'll start to do a movement and then it'll fall apart. So it's training to get the physical fitness and to get the stamina to hold the movements. And it's the same with the horse. So for instance, when Ty raises his head as I'm asking him to go around in rhythm in the trot, it's a symptom of him wanting to stiffen his body because he's finding it hard. It's hard for him to step underneath, over his hind legs, use his back and over into the bridle. So I'm asking I have to continually adjust. I'm like his personal trainer, okay, on his back. And when he goes to stiffen and do a movement in the incorrect way, instead of forcing the posture, I'm saying, no, I can feel him locking in his jaw, which is then going to stop the energy from coming up over his back and into the bridle. So then I've already taught him with a rein aid, okay, to release his jaw. So then when I feel him lock in his left jaw, okay, I ask him to release, and then he can allow then I continue to keep him forward and allow the energy to come up. His hind legs are keeping active underneath him, up over the back, but I also have to keep the front end nice and loose, because if I'm asking him to be nice and active from behind, but he's locked in his front end, whether it be his shoulders, his bracing in his poll or his neck, he's still not going to go down onto the bit because he's locked somewhere in the front. And this is what I find a lot of other aspects of people teaching on the bit is they address having active and go forward, okay, up into the bridle, but a horse cannot go up into the bridle if they're locked in the bridle or locked anywhere in the front. It's not only their bridle, but they could be locked in their shoulders. They're not turning properly with their front forelegs. So the front end is a big part of the horse working properly, and a lot of the time that is neglected. And once again, I've trained all this. I've taught Ty to step out, okay, in hand first before I've asked him under saddle. So then I applied under saddle. So you'll hear me in the video talk about asking him to turn, okay, so when I ask him to soften in the bridle, I ask him to also turn and step out with his front leg, and then I might use a little bit of leg yield, which he's still learning the leg yield and bending and softening to the leg, to bend, so move off just say I'm moving him, leg yielding to the left, okay, on a circle, I'm just asking him to bend through his rib cage and to move out. So when I put an aid on, I always want a response from him, okay, I'm just not, I don't want to be nagging him without a response so that he gets dull to the aid. So it's like a communication between us. So I just wanted to do a little video, talk about what I'm explaining in this snippet that you'll see in a moment. It is this elusive how to explain on the bit. And also too, I want to point out that Ty has been in retraining with me over 6 months now. So this is something, so where he is now is 6 months work of him being off the track. He spelled for a year, and then he came into retraining with me. He was very dull to the aids, okay? So he was actually quite shut down, very dull, like could hardly get in movement. He was stiff and he wouldn't go forward. So, if you have an off-the-track thoroughbred that's very dull, Ty's a very quiet thoroughbred. He's lovely. I have him obviously a lot more forward and very responsive to the aids. He needed a lot of physical rehabilitation. He had no top line at all. No top line for a young horse. It was amazing. The worst top line I've ever seen in an off-the-track thoroughbred. For a young horse, he looked like he had the top line of a 30-year-old. Not sure why that is. I would say part of it is he's had an extensive race career, and I know from looking at his racing history, and also to knowing he's compensated a lot throughout his racing history for pain, for injuries that weren't addressed, and, having to compensate to keep going. So using his body in a way to compensate for pain. I know he looked like he'd done a suspensory ligament And yeah, instead of that being diagnosed, I think he's just been made to keep going forward. I mean, I don't know, but I just looked at his history, and it just seemed, I know the last few years he didn't have any so-called time off. So yeah, it was a bit of quite a lot of rehabilitation with Ty physically, and also mentally. Like all off the track thoroughbreds, their association is quite one of a little bit of anxiety and stress when it comes to their work, because racing is very demanding. So just wanted to give a little bit of a explain what I'm doing in this. I think it goes for about 5 minutes. Now this is part of, it goes for about 45-50 minutes. So after I rode Ty here, his young rider hopped on, and then I taught a lesson with her, which I will upload for you. I'll get that up on our YouTube channel so you can see how I'm teaching her and how she now needs to learn to ask him, because her problem is he goes around with his head up. Okay, even though he's taught to drop his head down to use his body properly, he braces. Now, she's 12 for a start, and it's very hard for her. We had a couple of tears, but she's doing amazing, and you can see in this video I'll have up in the future. So she starts to connect with him. So it's just a matter of, and you also have to realize off the track thoroughbreds, if you've taken on off the track thoroughbred, it is hard work. It is not easy to retrain an off-the-track thoroughbred, because you've got a green horse and you're retraining behaviours. You're not only taking a green horse, freshly, educated under saddle horse that hasn't had any history. You have to retrain, so it's not an easy task, and I have full admiration for everyone out there, all you guys that are working with off-the-track thoroughbreds, because it's not easy. I went through the same path many years ago. 22 years ago, I got my first off-the-track thoroughbred, and I had massive problems. This was way before I even worked in racing. I just had no idea what I was doing. I had tears and anyway, that's another story. But I hope you enjoy this video, and I will continue. I will put a follow-up with the lesson with Carlia. And any questions, pop them in the comments below. And yeah, enjoy. Okay, bye.
Thinking of his hind legs, stepping over his back, underneath him, slowing his rhythm. So I just feel, keep a 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 2, 3, 4. So I'm keeping my forward. When he wants to put his head up, I just feel, so when he wants to put his head up, he's actually slowing his legs and wanting to hollow his back. 2, 3, 4. So I do a little flexion, keep my forward, and I do a little flexion and turn. Little flexion and turn to the right. 2, forward. That's okay. 2. Keep my forward. So I actually feel like, so good boy. I feel like my butt, my cheek butts, my butt cheeks, my butts are, my butt. I feel like my butt is connected to his hind legs. When I rise, they sort of pull them underneath. I slow my rise. Little with the leg kick. Good boy. So when he wants to brace his head, it's because this is hard work for him. So I do a little flexion and turn. I never ask for a flexion without some movement with his leg. So I just don't play with his mouth. So when he wants to put his head up, he's always wanting to slow down his legs. And I sit up tall, ask for walk. Good boy. So it's not easy, but can you see how I'm always concentrating on my rhythm? I'm feeling what's happening underneath me, and I'm feeling what his legs are doing. It's a little bit hard. It's really hard to explain this whole on the bit and contact thing to get them to carry themselves. It's really hard to explain, but and it's a real feel thing with riding. So, but that's why I've got to think. That's why I thought it'd be really good to film this, because I've got to think what I'm doing, because I sort of do it naturally now. Yeah. So, and that's why it's really this whole on the bit thing, having your horse going around in front. So first of all, you'll notice in his first, when he came for retraining and I first started riding him, I didn't even ask any, like it wasn't even something I would even think of. Breaking it down, and the first thing I did, because he'd hardly go forward. There's no way that he would even give it a nice active walk. So going back to your basics, you know, building up the foundations, getting him to respond nice and lightly to the leg, so he's nice and forward. And then teaching him in hand to soften. So see how his head's up a little bit here now? So I make sure I got my forward and he's stepping underneath with his hind legs. So forward. And I've just got a feel on the thing, so he's getting a little bit bracy. So I actually move him off my leg and ask him to look around to forward. So he wants us to keep my forward, and while I've got my forward, I ask for a, getting a bit confused. So he's getting a bit bracy. So this is when I do my turns. So I'm going to do a little bit of leg. So he's bracing, so I want him to soften in his body. So I'm going to move him off my right leg.
When you say bracing, you mean like his
head goes up and he gets, yep, so I'm going to move him off my right leg, and I'm going to do a little turn. So a little bit of look to the right and forward, look to the left. Now I've already taught him that when I ask him to flex around to the left to soften in his jaw, I taught that in hand. And then look to the right, so that's how you get them to soften in their body. Okay, instead of bracing, because I'm asking him to turn and bend his body and be nice and supple. Okay, we'll do a quick little one around to the right. So see, so he puts his head up, and what he wants to do is shorten his stride. Up and do, I want his stride, his hind leg stepping underneath him. This is why it's really important to make sure your saddle fits and everything is comfortable, because he's not going to want to step underneath him and over his back if the saddle hurts or the rider's a horrible, you know, if you've got some, you know, you're not riding correctly. Okay, so I keep him forward and then little tap, big tap, trip, nice. So he wants to brace himself, so I just keep my forward, just keep a feel on his bit, because I've already taught him to soften his jaw with a little flexion. But forward first, 1, 2, 3, 4, look. And little flexion and turn to the left and forward. Whoopsie dopsy. Bit yucky here because there's rocks, so I'll get out of this part. Sorry, Ty. Whoop. And forward. Doop, doop, doop. And little flexion.